Okay, again, I'm on kind of a deadline here, and this is the last thing I can do before I need to go to bed with a newborn. That sounded wrong. What up, everybody? It's Chip Walton. Welcome to Chop and Brew. I'm in the basement, and I'm on a deadline, as they like to say. But it's kind of ironic to say that because this episode is 6 years in the making. Is it 6 years in the making? Because it was a very special aged beer conditioned in rare wood barrels? Nope. Is it because it was a super complex sour beer with multiple fermentations and Solera until we got it blended just perfectly? No. It's 6 years in the making because I'm lazy. Or maybe I wouldn't say I'm lazy, I'm just easily distracted. The main reason it has to come out soon is this is the weekend of the big game, the game of all games. The Battle of the Pigskin is this weekend, and that kind of has something to do with this wacky beer in response to big beers, open hand slap slash diss on craft beer drinkers and craft beer brewers back in the 2015 commercial in The Big Game. This beer was born out of, I don't know, rage, out of sympathy, out of being upset at being called a fussy-ass beer drinker. This beer's got everything. A unique base malt, canned pumpkin in the mash, a homemade puree of peach and ginger, a broken immersion blender, and of course it's Beechwood aged as a proper shout out to the big guys. So join me as I retell the story in kind of fuzzy detail of the Chucklehead Pumpkin Peach Ginger Ale, brewed the easy way? All right, so as I said, we're on a deadline. I might kind of put this out really fast. I had always had images of grandeur about doing this episode and talking about each element specifically and why each unique thing worked together. We're not doing that. I'm going to do a real quick rundown through the recipes. I'm going to do some of those a badass musical brew montage that you know Chip Walton likes to do. And then there's tasting notes on the front porch back in 2015. We're going back in time with Don O to talk about it. So there's three things you have to know before we go into this real quick. In 2015, during the, I guess what some might call the Puppy Bowl post-game show, this big game that happens, Budweiser ran an ad and basically like smushed all craft beer drinkers in the face. It was a great ad, actually. It was really well done. And I did kind of my own parody of it. And I'm going to link that below. Definitely check that out. It was essentially the trailer for this episode 6 years ago. And then the episode never happened. But check out my parody. The second thing you need to know, why it's called Chucklehead, is the then lobbyist and vice president of communications for the Beer Institute did an interview with Matt Laszlo. Essentially, he was like, he was basically defending the ad, calling out craft beer drinkers and saying that macro drinkers are real, I don't know if I'll say men, but they're real people. They're drywall hangers, and they're the people that pave your streets, whereas these chuckleheads that are willing to spend $50 for a case of beer, you know, they're not important to the overall picture. And I, as a fussy beer drinker, took offense to that. And like Michael Jordan, I took it personally. Unlike Michael Jordan, I didn't go sweep a conference finals or some playoffs. I made a beer. I made a really wacky homebrew. So that's why this beer is called Chucklehead. The third thing you need to know is that I didn't take really good notes. I'm a habitual bad note taker. Most of what I pieced together about what I'm about to tell you, I've gathered from watching this 6-year-old video. I did find a recipe in Beersmith that clearly is not the one that I ended up using, and the tasting notes with Don O. Enough talking, let's drop a real quick montage. Okay, so this is already taking longer than I kind of thought it would, as you guys know I'm prone to do. So basically, this beer is a bunch of random kind of things put together that ended up working pretty well. So this is the way the process went down. Brew Day was March 4th, 2015. At the time, I was just getting into brew in a bag, so it was definitely going to be brew in a bag, you know, the lazy man's all grain, and it was definitely going to include extract because that's the super easy way. And then, like, I had peaches. I had this 7-pound bag of peaches that had been pitted and frozen in our deep freeze. So we also had a can of pumpkin, and then I had some ginger. So I was like, dude, this is all gonna happen. So first things first, I took about 5 pounds, I believe it was, of Red X. And if you don't know this malt, it's basically a base malt, but it comes out red. It comes out like Cara red, or like a crystal malt red, but it doesn't have any of that body and sweetness. It's almost like two-row, but it comes out red. So I mashed 5 pounds of that on its own, and then I hit it with the 29-ounce, I believe, can of Libby's pumpkin. Not pumpkin pie filling, which has a bunch of other sugars and spicings in it, but just plain old pureed pumpkin guts.
Bust that pumpkin up! Get there! Get out there, chunks of pumpkin!
Once that went in, the color got expressively more orange. I mashed that at about 156 for an hour. After the mash, I did what I do, and I take the kettle over to the sink. I pulled the bag, which was nice and gummy because of all of this pumpkin guts that was in there, and I drained it over a grill grate that I have specifically for brew in a bag. No chicken thighs have ever touched this out on the grill. This is my brew in a bag grill. Once I got all my wort collected from that, I took it back over to the stove, and as you can see, the color was really cool. Once I got it drained, got all the wort in the kettle, moved it back to the stovetop to try to get up to a boil. I get it boiling. I had a ½ ounce of Huell melon hops at 60 minutes. Just let it do its thing. This is where some of the cooler stuff for this beer comes in. While it was boiling, I made my own kind of fruit puree, I guess you could say. I took those 7 pounds of peaches, put them in a stock pot. I think I added a little water, maybe not, because the juice from the peaches alone was like 1032 specific gravity. So I think I just heated it in that, basically to kind of pasteurize them and sterilize them. I got all these peaches. I threw in a couple of little nubs of ginger. I had 3 ounces of ginger, because why not? If you're making a pumpkin peach beer, add a bunch of ginger. So I peeled that, added some into the pot that was going to be pureed. I also added some of the ginger at 5 minutes to end of boil, along with the other ½ ounce of the Huell melon. But going back to the puree, I hit that with an immersion blender for 5-10 minutes, I can't remember, just until it's smooth. But as you can hear, there's this little chunk. Unbeknownst to me, there was one stray pit in all of these peaches, and you guess it, your boy broke his immersion blender, broke the little like plastic gasket or like little I don't even know what you'd call it, like a bolt, like a plastic bolt in the immersion blender, because I kept trying to blend this thing thinking it was just a peach. The point is, at the end of this, I had a good amount of peach ginger puree. At the end of boil, we flamed out, we took it downstairs and chilled the wort, brought it back upstairs, sanitized carboy, and the first thing to go in was the fruit puree. And as you can see, I'm super fussy about my footwear when it comes to homebrewing. I'm wearing those old man house slippers as I finagle this Chucklehead beer. So the puree's in, I top that off with the chilled wort, and then I top it all off to about 5 gallons with some cold drinking water. And I will tell you what, the primary fermentation on this thing was pretty wild. I had a double yeast starter, 1,600 milliliters of American ale, and you can see the wort itself is very gutty and orange and chunky looking from all of that peach puree and that pumpkin puree. It was crazy. It was like watching like red clay try to ferment, and it took off.
Alright, here's the beer at 8 o'clock the next morning, so less than 12 hours after pitching. It does have a foamy krausen already starting to form. And you can see that the blow-off tube is already spitting off a gas bubble about every 5 seconds. So the beer at about 1068, I think, 17 bricks, is ready to tear through it with that double yeast starter. It's ready to get going. You can see I added one layer of brick in order to get this blow-off tube vessel up a little higher, because I'm worried that the foam might actually fill this gap, because this is going to be a rager. So I want to make sure that there's enough room in this actual jug for foam as well. Okay, this is day 2. We've added firm cap S a couple of times to temper this foam. Krausen is orange, all pumpkin-y orange.
After a very vigorous primary fermentation, I racked it into a 3-gallon carboy, and we lost a lot, as I explained in the tasting notes, we lost a lot of liquid to all of that chunky, funky stuff that was thrown in it. I didn't do a cold crash, which I should have done. I just racked it off the top. I wasn't necessarily sure I needed 5 gallons of this either way, so I was cool with getting 3 gallons. To be super fussy about this and to pay homage to the big boys of brewing, I racked this onto 3 ounces of Budweiser Beechwood chips. These are chips you can actually buy for smoking. They're actually really good for smoking chicken and pork chops with, but here I just threw them in a pan and I steamed them to sterilize them. I threw them in the carboy, I racked the beer on top of it. I left it maybe for about a week. It wasn't the biggest deal. It was really more of just like a joke, just because they point out how Beechwood aging is so epic in this ad. At the time in 2015, I did have a friend that worked for one of the Budweiser plants, and he talked about how important the chips are, or I think there they use more like long, like almost like barrel staves, but not so much for the color, but for Budweiser it's for like fining. It drags and yeast kind of clings to it, so it's like a clarifying agent. But I can tell you from cooking with them, they do have this like sweet, woody kind of flavor. I put the chips in. I wanted to do right by all the chuckleheads in the world. About a week later, I racked it off of the Beechwood chips into a small keg, and then I drank it. I drank it, a good bit of it. It was very good. You're about to hear some tasting notes. And then on May 26, 2015, so nearly 3 months after the brew day, about 3 months, I sat down with Don Osborne to taste some of what was the very last of the Chucklehead Pumpkin Peach Ginger Ale. Before I get to that, I will say that I thought this was, in the end, it worked out really well, and it checked a lot of boxes that Chip Walton likes to do. Chip Walton is like a spice rack brewer. I'm really bad with following a recipe. If I am brewing a to style recipe like a Irish red or anything, in the last 10 minutes I just get really agitated. I start getting the shakes and I go to the spice rack and I'm like, oh, can we put in some black peppercorns or some crushed coriander? So this is the kind of recipe that really hits that kind of extreme, if you want to call it, or experimental brewing vibe for me. And looking back at this, I was like, man, I should brew like this way more often, because I can get all the hazy IPAs, I can get all the pastry stouts, all the soured this and that, whether it's from friends or from pro breweries in Minnesota here. I was like, this is the kind of stuff I really want to get back into brewing, almost like culinary brewing your food or brewing with your food. So hopefully there'll be more of that in the future, because it really was cool and inspiring to go back and look at how many weird things in this process actually ended up working out. So like I said, a lot of this was pieced together from memory and from watching these videos. I am going to put the recipe as the best I can recollect it and gather it. I think I did a pretty good job. The Chucklehead Pumpkin Peach Ginger Ale recipe will be at chopandbrew.com/recipes. I'll also add any details that I kind of forgot here while I'm trying to do this in like a lightning round fashion. I'll put that in the recipe page as well. Before we get to the tasting notes, a mega-sized ad of my own for this episode. I want to remind you that Chop and Brew episodes are brought to you with ongoing support from BSG Handcraft. That is where the Huell Melon hops came from. Whoop whoop! Check out their full catalog of malts and hops at bsghandcraft.com. And our good friends at Imperial Yeast, who are now shipping commercial pitches out of their new East Coast facility in Pennsylvania. Imperial Yeast representing on both coasts. More information at imperialyeast.com. And as always, the Patreon party people who keep the wheels spinning round and round on the Chop and Brew mobile. Join them at patreon.com/chopandbrew. So now that you know how Chucklehead was brewed, we're gonna see what it tastes like with our good friend Don Osborne. Don O stopped by.
Hello, everyone.
Cheers, brother.
Cheers to you. Thanks for having me over once again. I think you get some spicy character in the aroma, and we were talking earlier, the fact that it's a pumpkin beer, has pumpkin in it, makes me think of the typical pumpkin spices, and I sort of was reading that into what I was smelling. I was smelling some cinnamon and maybe cloves and nutmeg, that type of pumpkin spice mix. However,
there
are none in there. But what there is ginger, and I think that was kind of throwing me, especially maybe for the clovey aspects that maybe I was getting. So you can smell that.
Yeah, I feel like the ginger in the aroma, the peach in the aroma, a little bit. We were talking a minute ago about how impactful these Huell Melon hops might have been with their melony strawberry. I feel like I get a little of that field berry, kind of tart berry smell in the aroma and on the flavor, but nothing stronger than the ginger. I feel like this almost tastes like Sprite, like a fuller bodied.
Oh, really?
Kind of like.
Is there ginger flavor in Sprite?
I think all of those, or ginger ale, or something like that.
I think that I had it. We were saying maybe a month ago, and the ginger was pretty forward. It was the dominant kind of flavor, and I think the bittering agent. I think the bitterness was coming from the ginger too, but it has lessened. I think it's definitely better now. It's getting clear, as you may have seen from any close-ups, and it has a really nice color.
Yeah, it does.
The Red X malt.
Yeah.
Do we think that it got any flavor from steeping 3 pounds of that? It probably got color.
Yeah. No, Damo said it's a pretty innocent. It's basically a base malt that just has this red tinge, and not a red tinge in the way that Cara Red or a caramel or a crystal. It gives off the appearance of being a crystal or caramelized malt, but it's really just a neutral kind of base malt. So I think this color definitely came from the Red X, but it also, as you saw in the video, like the moment that pumpkin hit it, it was like orange.
Gotta make sure you stir that up. Ooh, look at that color. Color got a little more orange right off the bat.
Okay.
And then that red saturated throughout that.
It's definitely
partial mash.
Orange as well. It isn't. I mean, if you were just gonna pick a color, you'd probably say more orange than anything, I suppose.
And I went with that Pils LME to be as also as unimpactful color-wise or body-wise. It's hard to be completely unimpacted by LME when it comes to body, just because we all know the richness of extract and the fermentability. But yeah, I tried to keep it to where all the weird things going in would be the things you taste.
I think there is sort of a underlying sweetness that maybe is somewhat from the peaches.
Mm-hmm.
It could almost be more. I don't know if that sweetness just ferments away like a lot of sweetness does from fruit. It just gets fermented, or honey or something like that. But I think maybe getting a little bit of that.
I really like it, and I was surprised that I liked it, because it's a lot of stuff. We're brewing it almost as an inspired joke, as an inspired poke in the eye. And I feel like in the end, it's actually, I would like this for a fall beer, because it doesn't have that cloyingly sweet pumpkin spice, blah, but it's got those elements of dessert for sure. The ginger, the fruits, a little bit of that residual sweetness.
Is it worth fussing over?
It is.
Is that the...
Hold on.
I need a coaster so I can trap these esters perfectly. I feel a little bit of that 7.2 alcohol, just a little bit on the cheeks as it dries out, but I also feel like there's a little of that ginger heat, because ginger in its raw form is hot. It's not spicy, but it's...
Right.
And I feel like I get a little bit of that, which is kind of nice. It keeps it from being just sweet in the end. I feel like that zip from the ginger dries it out.
It definitely acts as a bittering agent. It's a nice drinking beer. I mean, it goes down pretty easily. 7% alcohol. It certainly isn't... I don't get any alcohol character, like you were saying. You maybe do, but this certainly is not about the Beechwood chips, and it's not a barrel aged character. There's no oak barrel character. I think it was fun to do, I'm sure, but you're not doing it to get the character. Unless it's in there and I just don't know what it is.
I'm certainly having more fun grilling with it than
brewing
than I did throwing it in a carboy. I'm just glad I got all the pieces back. A couple of the pieces were like, I had to jam them in there, and once they soak up liquid, you're like, oh, I'm never going to see that again. But they dried out fine, and I was able to pull them out with like a needle nose pliers.
Oh, I thought they were be smaller. I haven't seen them. I thought they'd be small.
Some of them are pretty big, inch by inch maybe or something like that. But some of them are also just like, look like malt from the yard. I mean, I will say that I'm surprised that it got as low as it did. 10-13, I think, was about where it ended. Between the fact that there was extract and all these other sugar sources, the peach juice itself was 1032 when I took a gravity reading. So that's partly why my OG was higher than I ever thought, because I didn't even take into account how much sugar is going to come out of these peaches.
It's also diluting the volume though too. So I mean, there's that factor also.
Yeah. But all the same, with extract, I'm surprised it got that low. It's made me rethink, maybe going back to doing some partial mashing just to make it easier and to figure out the secret to getting those kinds of beers lower. I'm happy with it, man. It was just a little experiment.
Nice. It's a very drinkable beer that goes down easy. My glass, this is like my second glass that just sort of keeps disappearing.
Does it go down the easy way?
Is that part of the ad?
Yeah, the hard way.
Oh.
Originally, this beer was called the Easy Way until the whole Chucklehead reference, and I was like, oh, well, now it's going to be called Chucklehead.
But I think if you had to somehow categorize it or pigeonhole it, you would sort of think of it as a spiced beer. I think just because of the ginger. So if you either didn't want to do as much ginger or no ginger, then it would be interesting to see if any of the fruit character comes through a little bit more. Mm-hmm. You could mess with the hops. But as it is, I think it's a lightly spiced beer. It's not super hoppy, but it has some bitterness from the ginger, has good malt character, and as you can see, it's almost gone.
Boom. All right, cheers. Thanks for stopping by.
You betcha.
Maybe I have to go get some more.
You got it.
It is 11:30 a.m.
Noon somewhere.
So back here, 6 years later, 2021, I just want to bring it back to the basement and say thank you for all the people who have supported us and been with us since 2015 and actually 2013 at the beginning of the show. But it's really fun to see something like this finally get marked off my checklist. I can finally clear the project off of Vidzilla as soon as this is published. And it inspired me to look at extract and partial mash and brew in a bag and all the wacky stuff and really think back to that stovetop kind of way of brewing, especially with a very young baby. It might be the only way I can get stuff done around here. But it also made me think how patient fans of Chop and Brew have been. The fact that I put out a trailer for this episode 6 years ago and now it's finally happening. So peace, love. If you brew the Chucklehead, let me know. Do a little hashtag Chucklehead Ale. So until the next time, I hope you enjoy Football Con, the last game until September, the World Series of Football, Nacho Appreciation Day, Commercial Break Bowl, Not Soccer Bowl, and National Tom Brady Day. I hope you all have a wonderful, Super Sunday. Shout out to my boy Bob Sodman for coming up with half of those other nicknames for the game that shall not be named. Ooh, that's a good one. I should have named that. Should have called it that the whole time.
It is pretty nice. It could be a nice fall beer if you
If you need a fall
I
beer.
was trying to think of like make you edit this out, but I was trying to think of something better to say about that. But
You can if you want. It's still running.
I
Do you get
I
any
would
kind of woody?
See, I would have to.
Mm.
Sorry, I have to say.
Here.
Do you get any kind of wood character?
Yeah.
I'm talking to myself, Elsa.
I can hear you.
Look at that
Is
color.
this what, like, if nobody was here and you were just had a brew day all by yourself, would you just be talking to yourself like, look at that color. Ooh, this pumpkin smells good. It's sweet, but the crazy kind of sweet that I like. But you just be talking to yourself the whole time.
Kind of.
Okay, again, I'm on kind of a deadline here, and this is the last thing I can do before I need to go to bed with a newborn. That sounded wrong.
One more tip from the brew day. Definitely make sure if you're ever using peaches that you depitted and froze, that you make sure that there's absolutely no pits left. I broke our super awesome immersion blender because there was a stray pit in there that I hadn't realized. So yeah, casualty of battle right here. Not good because we use this thing a lot. So definitely beware if you're using an immersion blender. Make sure all solids, all hard objects are out of whatever it is you're blending.
All right then. Is that good?
I think so, man.
Let me get you some of this beer.
It's gotta be good enough. Whatever.